Thanks for joining us, everyone, on Cooking for Your Health. We will begin in just about 60 seconds. We'll give a couple people a little bit more time to join us in the live. Okay, well, let's begin. We are so excited. This is actually the last show of the year, but it's so exciting. We've had so much fun cooking with you, our guests. So you have, make sure you know where you're at here. You are with Ray Blaylark. I am the president and executive director of Sickle Cell Foundation of Minnesota. At the beginning of the year, we began to venture out to really start a conversation around what it means to eat healthy and what it means to exclude or at least reduce the number of inflammatory ingredients in your diet. We started out the year with a wonderful Sickle Smart episode by Dr. Kate Shafto about eating healthy and inflammation caused by foods. And then we ventured into this. This is a live cooking demonstrations that are so well done. Not only can you see the person who's cooking, but you can see the cutting board and the various techniques that they use. So I'm so excited. Let's start first. Now, I'm on a different setup, you all, so there might be a couple of glitches, but that's okay. The show must go on. So this is SickleSMILE. SickleSMILE is all about finding the fun and healthy things that make us smile and doing more of it. It is not just for people who are living with sickle cell disease. This is community health. Finding those healthy things, reducing inflammation, learning new hobbies, the things that really release the endorphins in our brain, frankly, and really make us, they're what I call the happy hormones. They make us feel better. And so we are determined that that's what we will do, and we'll continue to do that. And we love being able to open it up to the entire community. So thank you for joining us. I also want to make sure that, I can't find my cursor there. I also want to make sure that I say special thanks to our partners and sponsors, Be the Match, Agios Pharmaceuticals. By the way, the Rise Up study is open. Children's Minnesota Sickle Cell Program, and then of course the CDC and the Minnesota Department of Health Sickle Cell Data Collection Project. So we're very happy for our partners and sponsors joining with us in this effort. What's on the menu today? We're so excited. It's a fall feast, right? If you're in Minnesota, you know there's snow on the ground. I'm actually not in Minnesota right now. I'm in Georgia, and there's rain and cold. And so clearly, this is just that time of year. It's time for the comfort foods. And so we know that that there are a number of special holidays around this time that your family may celebrate. And what we want to do is make sure that we can help you with holiday dishes that the entire family can enjoy and that are low, that have a very low inflammation in them. And so without further ado, I want to introduce you to our wonderful cooks of the hour. They have been amazing all the year long. Dr. Kate Shafto, who is an internal medicine and pediatrics physician. She is board certified in integrative medicine, and she works out of Hennepin Healthcare and the University of Minnesota. She's also, I just love it as a pain physician, right? This just makes sense. I also want to introduce you to Jenny Brain, and she knows I love calling her Jenny Broccoli. She is an instructor in culinary nutrition at the University of Minnesota, and she is a nutrition and food systems consultant at Transforming the Table. If you haven't been over to that website, go check it out, transformingthetable.com, and you can learn more about the work that they do over there. So I'm going to come off of my shared screen until I'm told to go back to sharing. There we go. And I will allow our wonderful guests to talk about themselves and what we're doing here tonight.
Thank you, Ray. If you wouldn't mind, do you have access to the introduction slides that we use? And if you don't, that's fine. We can wing it. But I'm Jenny. I am Jenny Broccoli. That is my email address. That is my, in some cases, that is my identity. I am a broccoli lover. And I'm actually a vegetable lover of all kinds, and really excited to talk to you all tonight. As Ray mentioned, we're getting into, for some people, the holiday season. So we're going to dive into that. But before we do that, I think this is a really appropriate time to go over our core principles, and especially in the context of this season and some of the history around some of these holidays. So we start off with these assumptions, beliefs, or perhaps the knowledge of these things. What is good for humans' health is good for the planet's health. We base our teaching on traditional wisdom concerning foodways, which is supported by research from modern science and generations of cultural knowledge and practice. It's so important to put those two things together. I just came from showing students at the university a film called Gather, which is about this very thing, this traditional knowledge about food and nutrition that is also reflected in modern science. So we're very much respectful of and appreciative of that wisdom. They are common to every culture. In other words, you find this wisdom in different ways, in different forms, but in every culture. And I have to move. We teach with the acknowledgement. Oops. Sorry, I had to switch something on my computer. We teach with the acknowledgement of our privilege and the humility of many cross-cultural and community-based social and professional experiences. So we each, Kate and I, each come from a particular tradition. It is multidimensional, but we both recognize that we have extraordinary privilege in our home in the United States. And at this time of year, I'll just add that because we're coming up on the holiday of Thanksgiving, I think it's important that we acknowledge that we are on stolen land and that this is not a holiday or an observance of celebration for every person, particularly Indigenous folks or descendants of Indigenous folks in this country. And that it's really important that we be thankful and be grateful and acknowledge what we are thankful for, but that we don't conflate that with the history of what happened and how this land was taken from Native people. So I just want to acknowledge that. I have many, many things to be thankful for, including what I continue to learn about cultural humility and what the Indigenous community is teaching me. So I will say that before we dive into beautiful seasonal foods that are also Indigenous. Kate, do you want to add anything to that?
You did an amazing job. Thank you. You read my mind. And hi, I'm Kate Shafto. I totally agree with what Jenny said. We teach together in many different contexts and have really had the privilege of working with a very wide variety of different communities and cultures, both in this country and abroad, and just really honor and have a great reverence for the traditional wisdom that has come from so many different parts of the world and so many ages and generations of people. So yeah, happy to be part of this celebration and also just the opportunity to engage with our community around this type of food.
Yeah, and this type of food is both traditional and seasonal. And so there is something really wonderful about observing and being thankful at this time of year, because we have such an abundance. In Minnesota, well, if you're here, you know there's snow on the ground, so it kind of looks like the growing season is over, but there's still a good number of local products that maybe have been harvested but are in storage, or I know that my greens are still out in the garden just getting sweeter from the cold weather. So there's still a lot that we can enjoy. And I think everything on my cutting board right now is a local product. And I'm guessing that might be true for Kate too.
Likewise, yes, you can't, maybe yes, you can see our cutting boards in the other view. And there are a couple of ingredients, or I'll say friends, on our cutting boards that may not be familiar to everyone. So I think it would be fun for us to introduce our ingredients, our vegetable companions tonight, and just make sure that people are familiar with who we're working with.
I love that. They're friends. They are absolutely. If you've learned not anything, hopefully, from attending any of these classes or from speaking with Kate and me, you've learned that these are our friends, that beautiful, whole, fresh ingredients, foods are the things that our body likes. Are the things that our planet likes. So they're really, we're all friends. We need to take care of each other. So I have parsnip. Some of it's cut up, but I saved one. So parsnip kind of looks like a white carrot. And it tastes a little bit like a cross between a carrot and a radish and a beet or something. It's a little hard to describe the flavor. I love the flavor of parsnip. It is very distinct. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be mixed in with a lot of other things. So that'll be delicious. I have some sweet potato that I already cut up, but I have more here. You know, just your classic orange fleshed sweet potato. I have some regular white potatoes. I have this squash, which is it's a piece of what's called a kabocha squash. There are so many kinds of squashes. I love all of them. They each have a unique texture and flavor. I have a few others here that I'm going to be using next week with my family's meal. This is a buttercup squash, really dense, dark orange, kind of sweet and creamy like a sweet potato. And then I also have a butternut squash. But I encourage folks, if you get to a farmer's market or a food co-op or somewhere where there are options, to try some different kinds, because they can all basically be treated the same way, but they all have a little bit of a different component to them. So I've got those. I have some shiitake mushrooms, which are locally grown or locally cultivated. Got some carrots. I have a kind of a reddish one and an orange one, and then Brussels sprouts. I was super excited to see still some local Brussels sprouts. These are actually huge. So they're going in. And I have gold beets. So all of these are different versions of root vegetables with a few other ingredients. And they can all be used in the mash and in the shepherd's pie that we're going to do tonight. So
that is so fun. And then I have a rutabaga. I think this is such a fun vegetable. It's almost as big as my head. And this is a locally grown root vegetable. It has been cut off at the bottom where the longer root was and cut off at the top where the above ground part was. And this is a, in a family of other root vegetables, of which potatoes are part, and turnips. And I actually don't know the biologic family that it belongs to, the vegetable class, but a root vegetable nonetheless. And I'm going to be using it with potatoes as kind of a twist on your typical mashed potato recipe. I love mashed potatoes. Who doesn't? I mean, they're just delicious. And yet when you add some additional types of roots, it can enhance the flavor, make it a bit more interesting and also nutritionally much more rich and nutrient dense. Potatoes aren't the most nutrient rich root. They're much better when you leave the skin on, but a rutabaga and then another friend, celeriac. So this knobby kind of foreign prehistoric looking, I don't know what root, is in the celery family. So it's a below ground form of celery. So celeriac is like the word celery, but with an IAC at the end instead of a Y. And it has above ground leaves and stalks like celery. They're thinner and they're a bit more bitter. And both of these do have a little bit of a bitter taste, but also some of that creaminess, and with the celeriac, a very similar taste to celery, just a bit of a different texture. I also have some turnips, which I'm planning to put into the root mash that I'm doing, or this, mashed potatoes, but with different roots in addition to potatoes. And then I have still some carrots from my garden that are kind of little. I'll show you over here. They're little, but they're still delicious and sweet. And I'll just cut those up actually for the other dish that I'm planning to make, which is a twist on stuffing, if you will, but it's with wild rice. We're calling it a wild rice pilaf, or it could be a side, a sort of stuffing. I'm not thinking of stuffing like putting it in a bird stuffing, but sort of that side dish with the what some people have as a traditional breadcrumbs or pieces of bread.
Dressing. That's what people call it.
Dressing. Yes, thank you. Dressing would be a better than stuffing. Yeah, with some vegetables, celery, carrots, onions, garlic, at that kind of thing. But we're going to do that with wild rice, lentils, and a variety of vegetables, including mushrooms.
So I see a question, and I think the question was, do you cut it up with the skin on, or do you peel it? Is that
Yes.
correct? And it depends a little bit on the vegetable. Most of the vegetables here, the sweet potatoes, the parsnips, the potatoes, carrots, I would leave the skin on. You really, really actually want to leave the skin on when you can, because there are benefits, there are nutrients and fiber contained. You don't want to get rid of it. You can clean it, but don't get rid of it. The squash, I am cutting this peel off, not because it's not edible, but because it will be a little tough, especially in that mashed form. It's not really going to work all that well. Oh, nice graphic.
Cool. Nice. Way to
And
go.
then
Okay.
for Kate, for the celeriac, I would peel that.
Just gonna peel it. It's pretty tough and knobby and just not that pleasant to eat, but again, not dangerous. And the rutabaga, I'll also peel some of the tougher parts, but otherwise, no. There's like kind of a tougher area up by the root, or actually not the root, the stalk, just like around the top of it. I'll peel that a little bit, but otherwise the root is, or the covering of this root is pretty soft, and it'll just blend right in with the mash. And then as another squash family member, this is a delicata squash. I'll show that on my front view. It's really nice, and delicate is part of the word. I like to slice it up, take the middle out, the seeds out, but slice it into little half moons or just discs, and roast it or saute it in a pan, and it's really delicious. And the skin is so soft that it isn't bothersome to eat that. So I think those are my main ingredients, and then some thyme. This nice little bouquet of dried thyme that I've saved from my garden.
This image that you're seeing on the screen right now, Ray, I love, and I'll mention this is something I learned many years ago as a caterer when I was catering for a bunch of farmers, and I had this big platter of what I called roasted root vegetables, and some of them came up and said, some of those are tubers, and I was like, oh, whoops. So roots, tubers, it's a little bit hard to differentiate, but I believe that tubers have more of a more underground root system. And then there are rhizomes. So I think I see horseradish there. I see galangal, I see ginger. Those are rhizomes. So those are roots, but they're actually roots that have these very elaborate underground sort of systems, and they kind of connect and then come back up out of the ground in a place, kind of like raspberries, which make them very difficult to control if you're trying to control them. So that's
Cool.
Okay, I have a question about root vegetables.
yes.
Because they grow underground, you know, we know that so much of the food that is grown now are using chemicals and pesticides and things like that. You know, if you're not growing your own, what are the risks of buying non-organic? And I'm not even sure if organic, you know, holds the same weight as it once did.
Good question.
That is-
I have some farming experience and organic farming experience, specifically knowing that the chemicals are often applied for a couple of reasons. One, to keep away certain pests, bugs that attack the plant and make the harvest or yield lower, or the harvest, you know, impossible. Other times chemicals are applied to keep weeds at bay, or there's other types of diseases that can afflict various crops. I don't think about a ton of types of problems that come along with root vegetables. The ones that we are using, not so much, but I'd say, you know, if you can find out information about where the root vegetable was grown or what the growing conditions are, that's ideal. The nice thing about the local co-ops and farmers markets is you can ask directly to the farmer, or at the co-ops, you could ask the person in the vegetable department, where did this come from? And what do you know about the growing conditions? And so that's one way to find out. And I've learned from Jenny too. She says frequently, you can say this again if I don't get it right, Jenny, that, you know, that's the obligation of the store or the vendor of the vegetables to know where they've come from. And it's our right to know as consumers. And so asking those questions, if nothing else, raises awareness to the sellers of those vegetables that people want to know. I personally can't quote like a risk in terms of percentage of chemicals that get into the soil when applied to root vegetables. So that's something I'd love to look into more though. Jenny,
Yeah, well, the one thing I would say is it's true that the soil is a serious concern in terms of what it holds. But the beauty of a root vegetable is that it is fairly protected by its skin. And so while we did say don't peel your root vegetable, if you don't know, or if you have concerns about the quality of the soil, that is one thing you can do to just protect yourself, is to peel it, because a lot of those things just sort of they don't penetrate, they just stay on the outside of the particular plant. So that's important. The other thing I would say is there's sort of a hierarchy of risk. And there's a really great resource called the Environmental Working Group. Have an app that you can download for free. Or you can go to their website, and they have a list called the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And what that is it's they've done the research, and they've sort of looked at what the most high and low risk vegetables and fruits are when they're conventionally grown. And so the Dirty Dozen are the like top 12 that you just really want to avoid eating if they're not produced organically. And the Clean 15, and those tend to be more that have peels and skins, like avocados and citrus fruit. Those are, if you have to choose, those are better ones to choose that aren't organic, because it's a little easier to sort of remove that outer shell. So that's a really good resource to at least start to through that.
That's really good. So I number one, I love what you said, and the reality that it's our right to know, you know, where our food comes from, and where we are sourcing our food should be knowledgeable of
Yep.
of that chain, that line, until it got to us.
Yep.
And so I don't think that most of us have been in the habit of asking that question, but that is a question that I'm going to ask, even if I know it's going to stump them. So
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Great.
you're the one spending the money, you're the consumer, and you want to know where your money's going. And also, you know, you can leverage, we as consumers, that is the most power that we have, is we are consumers. And so if we want grocery store to be more knowledgeable about where they're sourcing their food, then we can say, look, I want to support you, but I want you to provide me with this particular information. And more grocery stores are getting that. They understand that customers want that. So I think it's a really good way to move the needle a little bit, you know, because sadly, for better or worse, right, money speaks. We vote with our forks. I mean, there's lots of different ways to say it.
that's right.
I do that at restaurants too. I am, you know, I'm that person who says, if it's not there, right, where does it come from? Did you procure it? What, you know, how is it grown? Whatever. Because again, I'm about to spend a lot of money. I want to know.
I love
And you're about
that.
to put it in your body. Like it's going into our body.
Absolutely. And it's a responsibility, right? You know, we have a responsibility of knowing what we're putting in our bodies. And wherever we're sourcing our food has a responsibility to know where they are sourcing from. And that includes the staff that may or may not be involved in that process. So if you're a viewer, we encourage you to begin asking your grocers, asking your local restaurants, asking about the sourcing and even what chemicals that they may know that are being used. So I love it. I'm all about empowerment. And like you said, we vote in many ways, and we should participate in as many of those ways as we can, but we vote with our fork. I love that. I love it.
3 times a day. How many other opportunities do you have to vote? 3 times a day?
That's so true. That is so true. And so which really explains why we have some of the things on the shelves that we have, because if the demand is there, people are continuing to eat it. They are knowingly or unknowingly voting. It's a thumbs up vote, like, yep, keep serving it to me. And it's when we stop purchasing food, or we reduce the amount of purchasing of food that's unhealthy, that it begins to shift the demand.
I also just want to acknowledge that not everybody has a lot of choices, right? There are places where it's what's available or it's nothing. And so sometimes it isn't really a choice. People are voting because they're forced into it. And
that's
so
right.
There's an element of the way that our food system works and how industry and marketing, you know, manages to get things on the shelf. Especially in places where there are fewer resources, people also have fewer choices. So,
and that's why next year in 2023, we are going to focus so much on growing your own food.
Yes.
Because that's kind of where, now that we've learned you can do it and we can do it and it can be tasty, now we need to know, okay, if I can't go buy it and maybe I live in a food desert, I want to grow this food. And even Ray wants to try her hand at gardening again. You all have encouraged me in multiple ways.
Good. So glad. Yes. And I think it's a place where people who do have more choices or opportunities, and regardless of our level of resources and choices, we are also voters in a political system with representatives who do make decisions about policy. And so collectively gathering our voices to make, you know, communication, share our desires, our preferences, our needs with our policymakers is another way to change the system.
Absolutely. We can't assume that they know it if we're not sharing it, telling them, expecting it from them, and letting them know that's what we expect. So excellent, excellent.
I'll let you all know that our lieutenant governor in particular, both our governor and our lieutenant governor are friends of small immigrant farmers and local farmers. So we have the opportunity to really impact some of these things right now. There's a budget surplus in Minnesota, and some of that money is getting there's a lot of suggestions that needs to go towards improving our local food system. So
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Good to know. And we want to make sure that we do our part as responsible citizens and responsible, nonprofit organization to make sure that we support those efforts.
So I want to just tell people what I'm doing over here on the stove. So just a little about the actual cooking going on back here. So we will talk about stock, but as I have been cutting up vegetables, I have been dropping the bits and pieces into this pot behind me, and I can show you in a moment. That has some chicken bones from a previous meal, and then it's got the onion skins and the carrot ends and the parsnip ends and all the various bits and pieces, because I'm putting a stock together. And the reason we thought it would be nice to do a stock, many people have turkey on Thanksgiving or some other meat, and it's really, really an opportunity to get a lot more out of that bird, to save the bones. There's still usually meat left on them, although in my family it picked pretty clean, but throw those bones and whatever vegetable, scraps you have into a pot, and you can make a really incredibly rich stock that can also then be turned into a soup. And we did a class on soup a couple months ago, but it's just a really nice, nutritious, nourishing thing to get out of what you've already got on hand anyway. So I've been doing that. And then I also have my root vegetables are simmering in water, because I'm making a mash also, but my mash is going to go on top of a shepherd's pie. So I'm going to do a variation of a shepherd's pie. If folks don't know what that is, it's sort of a traditional, it's British, but a mashed potato crust with vegetables and usually ground meat underneath. I'm going to be using some ground turkey from Ferndale Farms, which is down in Cannon Falls, a wonderful family-run turkey farm. So I'm going to be cooking that up in a moment, but just wanted to make sure everyone knows what's happening behind me and all the pots that are steaming back here. And happy to answer any questions about any of that. And I'm going to turn my camera over here so you can see the stove, and I'm going to start cooking my turkey meat and some of the vegetables for the shepherd's pie.
Thanks, Jenny.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, when you're making a mash, are there certain vegetables or certain root vegetables that might be too strong for a mash, or are strong in a just right way?
I personal preference. I know my kids, if I have too much parsnip, they don't love that flavor that much, but if it's just a little bit mixed in, it's usually fine. So it really depends on just what you like.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
So I've got in the food view down here, I've got my parsnips. No, that's Jenny's food view. My rutabaga. So this is what the rutabaga looks like. I'll show from the front view and then the side view too. Yep. So that's the inside. It's just a kind of pale white yellow flesh. And then here's the outside, and the skin is super thin and tender, so I'm not going to peel it at all. And then I have these little turnips, and I'm going to put those into the root mash also. And then I think I'm going to roast this delicata squash as well as this other half of the rutabaga, just for a different texture, a different addition to this feast. So I'll be doing that in a moment too. And I also on the stove have, I'll turn my camera over there shortly, but I have some wild rice that I already cooked and some lentils that I had cooked previously, so I'm not going to be demonstrating cooking those.
And you all just let me know when you want me to put the shared screen back up.
Oh yeah. Well, why don't you do that, Ray, just to show the kind of the ingredients for the root mash. I guess you already did, and then you could maybe move on to the wild rice pilaf. Just to show those ingredients. Yeah, I love it. So I'm just now, putting the vegetables, these root vegetables, into the water with my pot, and you can adjust the water as needed. You could also use chicken or vegetable stock to make the flavor even more rich. I love butter, and so I'm going to put a good amount of butter in there too. And then salt and pepper. I also probably will put some garlic in there. And then you could do the good old fashioned mash with a masher, which I actually have right here, my masher, you can see on the food view. So a by hand mashing is possible. And also an immersion blender is nice because you don't have to transfer the hot ingredients into a blender. It's otherwise called a stick blender. That can be nice to mash it. But I mean, once it's pretty soft, it's really easy to mash by hand.
Yeah. Yep, I'll probably use just a big whisk or a wooden spoon or something.
Totally.
And there was something you said I wanted. Oh, also, something that's kind of fun. Like I actually really like chunky mashed potatoes.
Yeah,
I like them to have a little bit of texture to them.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is entirely up to you also. So if you use a blender of some kind, they'll get pretty creamy and smooth. And there's certainly something enjoyable about that. Or if you use your hand or your, masher, you'll get a little more texture, which is personally how I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I've never tried mashing with my hands, but I'm not afraid to do so either.
Well, not your hands, but just with a non-electronic.
Not a machine.
Manually.
Manually. Yeah. Non-electronically or something like that. Yeah.
We have to clarify that now because everything is plug-in or Wi-Fi.
Well, here's what I'll say. If it's cool enough, that would be a great thing for a kid to do.
Oh,
Give
totally.
them getting them involved.
And have them, but even if not with their hands, but with a masher or a whisk or a spoon, that would be a great task for a kid.
I totally agree. That's a great way to get the kids involved.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice. Okay, next slide. Here's your wild rice pilaf.
Awesome. So this is like Jenny corrected my stuffing, dressing, side dish, whatever you want to call it, or main dish. Hello, you could easily put some slices of turkey on top of this, and that would be a delicious combination of nutrients and tastes. And this is, again, we've talked about the kind of template. So it doesn't have to be these exact ingredients or these exact quantities, but just the kind of overall sense of we've got some onions and garlic, which make everything smell and taste delicious. And then a couple of different sort of traditional dressing ingredients, carrots and celery, and some herbs like thyme. And then I like putting a twist on it to include mushrooms because I really like mushrooms and I just enjoy that sort of earthy, hearty addition that they make. And then to make it the pilaf, we're adding some lentils just to have that protein. And if you don't love lentils or you want to do a different bean, that would be another option. Or diced meat of some kind, or a ground meat could even work in this in place of the lentils or in addition to the lentils.
Nuts or seeds.
And nuts or seeds. Yeah, absolutely. I've actually put sunflower seeds on top of this. I just remembered that. And then the wild rice, I only had a small bit of it and then realized I had some brown rice in the freezer in a jar that was already cooked. So I'm going to hopefully have that thawed in time and combine the two. So you could do any sort of grain. Doesn't have to be wild rice. Yeah. So I've cooked the last two ingredients, the wild rice and the lentils previously, but just starting this now to get those things cooked if you hadn't had them cooked already, because they take longer than the vegetable portion. And then otherwise it's a matter of chopping up my onions, garlic, carrots, mushrooms. I'm going to use some of that celeriac as well and sauteing it with some sort of fat. And that's about it. And combining it all.
And is there anything that we should mention about like the order of, sometimes we see recipes, and they have a particular order in which that, they're telling you to add things. And though I understand that, if they're saying, you got to boil it first and drain it, right? But then there's other times that it's like, okay, but can I put the celery, garlic, herbs, and salt and pepper in at the same time? Is that doable?
Yeah, good question. Jenny, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So on some level, in the end, it doesn't matter. Again, it depends a little bit on what you're doing, but here is what I would say just generally in terms of building flavor. The onions, the garlic, those are the things we call aromatics. Those are the things that what it's like when you start sauteing onions and garlic, it just smells really good. If you want to entice somebody to come and eat, that's a great way to do it because it stimulates this sort of, that smells so good. What are you making? So, and that's because you are building a bunch of flavor, and that's really the foundation of making something delicious. It's not the only thing, but it sort of starts that process. And then you layer on top of it. And then there's the other component of how long things take to cook. So you have your longer cooking vegetables, like your root vegetables, even your carrots are root vegetables. I've got Brussels sprouts here. They're in the cabbage family. They can be cooked for shorter or longer periods of time, but they can handle a lot of long cooking, and they actually get really delicious if they cook longer. So then it's just sort of a matter of cooking things as in the order that it makes sense to cook them in for the dish that you're making. So for example, I'm working on the shepherd's pie, and that is going to have sauteed vegetables underneath that I'll mix with my ground turkey. And then the mash is going to be the crust on top. So I want these to be nicely cooked, but then it's going to get put in the oven. So I don't want them to be so cooked that they turn to mush. So you're kind of thinking about, onions, root vegetables, those things can handle a long time. They flavor builds, they absorb flavor, they stay pretty firm. Things like maybe mushrooms or peppers or greens, those are going to be faster. And so you want to kind of hold off until towards the end to put those things in. But you always really want to start with the aromatics, garlic, ginger, onions, leeks, that whole family, because that's really where you start to build flavor. And even as spices that you're adding, you're going to add those at the beginning when you're sauteing fat. So the fat really holds on to that and distributes it. And then you're going to add things.
That makes so much sense. And you're right. I mean, sometimes I find myself just naturally pacing what I add to make sure I'm getting all of the flavor profiles that are there. And while I'm cooking and my family's smelling it, that they're smelling it and getting hungrier as well.
Yes, it prepares us for good digestion.
We talked about that earlier several months ago, that that the brain kind of takes over and begins, when your stomach starts growling and things, like it's getting ready for the digestion process. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is so cool.
Yep, it's exactly what's happening. Good job. Good memory. Way to go, Rick.
I also learned something today. I actually was teaching a cooking class for a group, and one of the people there is a meditation and mindfulness instructor. And she said the community part of cooking in a group is also preparation for digestion, because it is calming.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is element of like getting into this sort of positive place that calms your nerves and gets you ready for the next part. So I thought that was
true.
I love that. And also thinking back to just traditional food practices, there is no culture that has ever done food in isolation, as in individuals doing food in isolation. We've always done community and food together. That's just how it has to be. I mean, that's how it had to be with real practical needs like hunting, gathering, preparing, harvesting. No one could have done that alone. And so
And they didn't have a lot of waste. And so, you know, I mean, it's so intriguing and innovative. But I imagine too, you know, something struck me when you said, you know, eating in a group, preparing food in a group, and the relaxation. You know, when you're stressed out, you can't lose weight no matter how hard you try. It is very, very, very difficult. Your brain and body think you're in some sort of survival mode.
Absolutely.
And so, so when you're relaxed and you are in a place of safety, acceptance, all of these other elements that go into quality of life, that actually allows your body to release some of that stress hormone called cortisol, right? So that it can actually process these nutrients the way our body's meant to.
That's right. In the absence of cortisol, when our stress levels are low, we're able to digest. Our immune system works better. We can heal. Our metabolism gets into better balance, and we're not way out of whack on some survival mode all the time.
I just need to show you stunning carrot.
Oh, that's a beautiful carrot.
Wow.
I don't even know.
It's like bacon.
It's incredible. It's like red and pink. So I just had to show that to you before I cut it up.
So is that part of the root that's growing up the middle?
Yeah, that is the middle. You know how when you sometimes carrots have like that middle part that you can actually pull away from. I don't know if you experience that, but that's absolutely part of that's like probably the original root.
Wow.
So I just talk a little bit about this bottom part, the filling of the shepherd's pie that I'm creating right now. So I have my onions and garlic and carrots in there, and I'm gonna add my mushrooms and Brussels sprouts. The Brussels sprouts, they're a little big. I might have maybe should have cut them a little smaller, but I'm just gonna go with it. And I'm gonna salt this because that helps to tenderize and draw the moisture out, which will soften it how I want. And I'm also gonna add, I'm putting a little celery seed. Celery would also be delicious in here, but I don't have celery. And cumin, that's what my recipe suggests. But again, there's tons of room for your own ideas about this. And I want this to saute and get nice and soft and tender. Remembering that I'm then going to mix it with my meat and then put the mash on top, and it's all going into the oven. So it will continue to cook, but you can see my mushrooms are still raw, and mushrooms are wonderful. They have a lot of moisture in them. And when you cook them, they get kind of wet. A lot of people stop before they've gotten past that wet stage to that beautiful caramelized stage. So I want to cook this at least until I've got caramelization on my Brussels sprouts and my mushrooms.
And Jenny, I know you're turned around, but I want you to know that I have the ingredients up.
Oh, yeah.
And so all of the things that you've talked about, you didn't talk about the milk. Why do we add milk?
That milk is just because I'm a traditional shepherd's pie is kind of a creamy dish. So I would say that's actually pretty optional. You can omit it or you can put it in.
Okay.
Just to create a little bit more moisture, because again, it's going to go into the oven and that's going to, the moisture is going to get drawn out or dried out.
Yeah.
So that's what that's from. But again, that's flexible. And then I'll just show you my mash. It's pretty much almost all the water is absorbed and it's looking pretty soft. Yeah. I'm just let that water absorb. I'm also going to add a nice handful of butter and maybe some milk. Again, it depends because it's pretty creamy as it is and I might not need any liquid. So even though these recipes do suggest milk, I also encourage people to kind of just use your judgment, and some of it is what kind of texture you want. Do you want it to be a little wetter or do you want it to be kind of more dry and caramelized? So
yeah, I similarly, I think about that, when I'm making pancakes, right? How much of that liquid you add really depends on how how much moisture or fluff, or, so it is to taste. I also noticed, and I love it, this is with those who cook most often rarely, if ever, actually measure their ingredients. But for those who might not be comfortable with that, the ingredients do say exactly how much, but as you begin to cook and as you begin to feel more comfortable, and I would argue get a whole lot more compliments and things, you feel more confident, and you may find that you don't need to measure as much.
Exactly. And I would say too, think of the recipes for these dishes as suggestions or guide. And with that option to do more or less depending on your taste or upon what's available. With baking, like a recipe for a cake or cookies or bread or muffins, the proportions are a little bit more exact. And so don't stray too far from a baking recipe just yet, until you have more experience with how that recipe behaves and different ingredients and different quantities. But for these like savory sort of cooking, less baking, tons of flexibility.
I want to also highlight these beautiful colors. I know we talk about that in almost every show. One of the ways you're on the right track to cooking with more anti-inflammatory ingredients is your food becomes more colorful. So I love it. It's just gorgeous to me.
And I would say it looks like if you're using seasonal ingredients, it will look like this. So to me, this looks like late fall. When springtime, I'm eating leafy greens, like lettuces and herbs, and that looks a lot more like spring to me. So I think there's something very, very distinct about what foods, the colorful foods of each season.
Yep, it's lovely. I love that.
It's amazing how it all comes together, and it's the way that we were, designed to eat.
Yep. Yes.
That's great. So one of the things that I added that I'm curious about is, can we talk a little bit about real butter versus butter substitutes?
Yes.
Because I love butter, and I used to use a butter substitute that I grew up with and didn't think there was anything better other than sliced bread. And now I can't not use real butter.
Good. What changed for you, Ray? Was it just taste, or what was it?
You know what? It was really, so the taste, I think you would get an acquired taste, especially to the butter substitutes, because they do add these other ingredients that tend to taste good to your palate. But I started learning about the difference between butter and butter substitutes. And I just began to make, changing my diet has been a long journey. And I start with the little things so that I don't overwhelm myself or I don't set myself up for failure. So it was one of the little things I did, and it has stuck for a number of years.
And what did you start learning that made
I was on a weight loss journey, actually, and I was doing a low carb, high protein and moderate fats diet, and I felt like that looking at the calorie count, number one, and looking at the benefits of what that good fat could do, it gave me a different perspective. And then, of course, just learning what butter substitute can do to your arteries. And it's just overall unhealthy to put that into your body.
Right. So we did grow up in an era where we were, not only were we taught that fat was bad, but also that it would make you fat. And there's a whole history and kind of context to all of the things that play into that messaging, including some very powerful lobby and research influence by the sugar industry who said, let's convince everybody that fat is really bad. And then we will just have an incredible boon because we'll take the fat out of everything and it will taste terrible. And then we'll put sugar in instead.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And they'll be hungrier because fat is actually, good fat is actually satiating. So you get full faster and for longer.
Exactly. Exactly. Butter it's interesting to me because the meat industry was also very powerful, but somehow butter and I guess fat in general just got such a bad rap that butter was a part of that. And so that allowed for the food industry to create this whole new version of butter, right? Margarine, and then all of the variations on that. And what they do is they change the chemical structure of the fat. Yep. So they hydrogenating an oil, so they add an extra hydrogen atom, and that changes the structure. And exactly as our body doesn't break it down, so it stays in that kind of form in our bodies. And instead of doing what fat does, which gives us energy and helps us absorb vitamins and helps us sustain our bodies, it damages them. And so they really pulled one over on people by both convincing them that it's still a fat, but it's just like a lower calorie fat, which is silly because calories and fat really are not important.
Well, healthy fat versus unhealthy fats. And I think that was the most profound to me, is learning and understanding that healthy fats actually obviously make you healthier, but keep you full fat longer.
Yep.
And so you actually eat less, but you're eating more of the good things
right.
that fulfill your nutritional needs.
Right.
Right. And it's also, so much of the concern is misdirected to fat. Right? And so this whole idea that we need an alternative to real whole fats is really problematic, and it's still going on. My own alma mater just put out research last year saying nutritionists should recommend these margarines because they don't have any, I guess they don't have hydrogenated oils in them, but they're still an artificial product. So we in the nutrition field still have a huge way to go in terms of saying, rather than coming up with pretend foods that don't come from nature, we should just help people recognize and understand how to incorporate all the real foods.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
I'll add one more layer to this. Most of those margarines and butter substitutes come in a plastic container. And the last thing our environment needs is more single-use disposable plastic containers. And so often butter is in, at least it's like a little paper wrapped container or cardboard or something. And so a lot less waste, and you're not getting the plastic chemicals that are leaching into the food from however much they do that. So from an environmental standpoint, remember we talked about what's good for the earth is good for humans, and that applies to butter too.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
All right.
So I'm going to just turn this back over to my, I'm just going to show you my my mat, which you can see is pretty chunky. I used this wooden spoon to mash it. So I'm leaving it. I put butter and salt. And I also, and this is in the recipe, shepherd's pie, I pulled out a clump of pesto from my freezer earlier this summer. I, just made a bunch of pesto and froze it in small chunks like this. And so if I pull it out, it takes about 20 minutes to half an hour to thaw. So this is just a big lump of, I'm not even sure if it's cilantro pesto or basil pesto, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to throw it right into my mash. So that's going to add just a whole other layer of flavor into this mash, which is going to get spread now on top of my, so you can see I have my veggies and meat spread out in this just baking pan. And now I'm adding my mash with the pesto and the butter. If you want it, if you enjoy like a goat cheese or something, you could mix that in, or you could just kind of dot it on top. And when you pop it in the oven, there's all kinds of things that you can do, but here is that I'm spreading now. So you can see this really does actually make like a nice crust. And then even though everything in this dish is already cooked, I'm going to put it in the oven just to give it a little bit of caramelizing on the top so it gets a little crusty, and just to make sure it gets heated through so that when I pull it out, you can actually cut a piece and, you know, serve it as a pie.
That looks amazing.
Does look pretty good. Well, the other thing I'll show you since I'm talking is this stock that has been cooking. So when it started, it was about almost to the top, the liquid, and it's just been simmering, kind of bubbling on my stove as I've been throwing different vegetable pieces in and threw that chicken in. And so that's just been on my stove since before we started, so probably an hour and a half. And you can see it's really dark now because of all the onion skins. You actually can use onion skin as a dye, like for clothing and stuff. So there's some beautiful.
Really?
Yeah, you can.
I had no idea.
In our, we have a traditional Passover meal, my family every year, and there's one person who brings dyed eggs, hard-boiled eggs that have been dyed with onion skin. So they're this gorgeous, dark, kind of reddish brown color. But anyway, that's the color of the stock because it's got a lot of onion skin in it. You can see maybe some of the squash peels and the herbs also floating around. And then I've got some chicken bones. And what I'll do, I'll let this cool, and then I will just pour it through I'll probably just use this. You can use a colander if you want, or I'll just maybe use this strainer that I have. Nothing fancy, just a regular old strainer. And I will strain out all the vegetables. And then when the chicken bones are cool, I will go through with my hands and pick the meat off because there's inevitably still some meat left on bones, even if you've already eaten. So that's a really great way to get a whole nother meal out of that chicken after you've eaten the chicken.
I love the way, you know, there's so many things that I've never thought of boiling until this year. So not related to this show's menu, but I love, love, love pineapple. And I actually boil my pineapple skins for tea.
Oh, that's
delicious. And it's absolutely delicious.
There's
and
also
benefits.
There's a particular, oh, what is it? There's a nutrient in the skin of a pineapple. I'm not going to remember what.
Prominent. It starts with a
Bromelain.
P. Yes, I think it's
bromelain.
What does it do? I can't remember.
It's very helpful for digestion.
Digestion, yes, yes.
What's digestion?
And I'd have to look it up. I know that when I started it, I was like, yes, that's what I need. That's what I'll do. But also even banana peels. I've read some things about the benefits of boiling banana peels for tea as well.
Nice.
Interesting.
So I just wanted to also highlight, speaking of don't waste things, I'm going to show it in my food view over here. Hopefully you can see that. I have my squash pieces. There we go.
Hang on, I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. There it is.
There we go. And the seeds. So you can see the seeds. You can eat squash seeds. So I'm going to toast them just in the oven along this same baking sheet. I'll need to check it after about 10 minutes because they don't take that long and the squash will take longer. But don't waste the seeds. They're delicious, full of great vitamins and minerals. Really yummy.
And
so is that for garnish or for snacks? Or both?
Lots and lots of nutrients. So again, quality fat, protein, all the things that seeds have, you can take of.
So I'm almost done with my peel off ingredients. I'm just going to get my mushrooms chopped. I wanted to get that squash in the oven. And then I will saute those in with my celeriac, carrots, onions, and garlic, which smell amazing. My root mash is just bubbling away. So it's going to be a little bit longer, but not that much. And then my lentils and rice are already cooked. So I got things lining up here.
And since we have a little time, Kate reminded me of another recipe that's just a really fun sort of recipe. I usually make this sauce when I'm roasting Brussels sprouts and sweet potatoes together, but it can really be used for anything. And the honey horseradish sauce. And so it's essentially using the same that we used a few weeks ago when we did sauce. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of put it together. I'm starting with my garlic and ginger. And in this case, for this recipe, these don't get cooked. So I want to, they will get cooked when I put them on the vegetables, but it's more of a raw sauce, almost a dressing. So I do want to make sure that my garlic and my ginger are minced pretty small. So a reminder to kind of take your hand on top of your knife and kind of go back and forth with your knife to get your garlic minced pretty small. You can scrape it off the blade and then just keep going back and forth like this. And then with the ginger, if you have a teaspoon, you can use that to peel your ginger root. I don't have a spoon right with me, so I'm just using a knife for time. But similarly, I'm going to use this sort of bridge to hold the ginger over my knife and cut lengthwise in thin pieces. Then I'm going to turn it and cut lengthwise again. So I'm essentially making like little matchstick pieces with my ginger like that. You can see that. And then I'm going to go across. So I'm getting them very small, just like the garlic. I'm mincing, but I like to go lengthwise first and then cut across, just because ginger is very fibrous. So this is a much more effective way to get it nice and small. And those two things are kind of the base of this sauce. So they're going to go into my measuring cup. This is a lot of ginger and garlic. So this is going to be strong. And then I have horseradish. And I like to make sure people understand there is something out there that's like a horseradish sauce. And that's a sauce that has horseradish in it. It's not just straight up horseradish. So this recipe, this is just another root vegetable, a radish, but a particular kind of radish called horseradish, which is pretty spicy. And this is just ground up horseradish in a jar. There's nothing else in here. So I'm just using that. So a relatively spicy base because I've got the ginger and the horseradish in here, which is why I have this very little baby jar of honey, but I'm balancing it with the honey. So I've got the spicy part. I'm going to add oil, just like I do with any dressing. So that's my fat, and this is olive oil. I'm going to also add some toasted sesame oil. So there's a lot of kind of Asian flavors in here. This dark oil is the toasted sesame oil. And then I'm also adding vinegar. So I'm still putting acid in, just like in any sort of basic dressing. And then I'm really cutting all of those strong flavors with my honey. And so that's going to be a very important element because this is like a sweet and spicy dressing. I think I also am putting a little, so this is, I know I'm doing this quick and we don't have a slide for this because this was a kind of a last minute addition. But if you think about that formula that we've talked about, where we've got our oil and our vinegar, our fat and our acid, That's really the foundation. And then I'm just putting layers of flavor. So I've got some spicy and some bitter, and I've got some sweet. And if you just kind of keep layering, you have flavors, and then you have that texture, that emulsification that happens when you add some of these other components. So this is the honey horseradish dressing, and that's something I will roast vegetables, and I'll pour this on kind of halfway through when they're roasting. So they get this wonderful sort of spicy, sweet flavor to them as they cook. So just another fun thing if you're trying to think of some interesting holiday or just seasonal recipes, this is just a sauce to add to your repertoire.
Wow, I love that. Okay, so I have a side question yet again. So you mentioned honey, and I've heard that if you have allergies, that buying locally sourced honey is the answer.
Yes, definitely help. So raw local honey will have the pollen imprint from the bees of this area. And that can help in a small and gentle way our body understand what kind of pollen is out there and can tamp down the allergic response for some people.
So when you think about reactions to things, a lot of times the way that we address that, even vaccinations are an example of this, is to give people a small dose of that thing so that they can have an immune response. And that is kind of what that local pollen will do. It's a similar thing.
Awesome. Now I do see that there's a request for the honey horseradish dressing, and I will get that and include that in the email that we're going to send out. And so I'll make sure that that's in there.
Hey, sounds good.
Well, so I'm just putting the last of my ingredients in my pilaf skillet, just for color. I love the green. Adding a tiny bit of kale here, which will cook down really nicely. And I'm just going to put my lid on and steam that so that it wilts a bit and gets soft. And then my vegetables are ready, the rice is ready, and my lentils are ready, and I'll mix them all together in a bowl that I'm going to get from the other room.
And when she says steaming that, what it means, even though she's not adding liquid to these vegetables, there's obviously some moisture just in the vegetables and in the pan from the heat. You cover a pan that you're using to cook stuff in, you create some steam. And that's a really great way to help things cook without kind of overcooking, getting them mushy by adding a lot of liquid. So you can generate steam just by putting a lid on something for a minute or two. And that kind of helps to wilt or cook, or just sort of get things a little bit further along without overcooking them.
I like to steam my vegetables for that exact reason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want them mushy. I don't want them overly cooked. I don't necessarily want them raw, but and I don't want to lose all the nutrients either.
Great. That's a good way to do it.
I'll show you my food view. I think you can see the wild rice. That's cooked. It's lovely local wild rice. We could talk about the origins of that also, but I finished cooking, so the water was absorbed, and then I just kept the lid on, and it got nice and sort of fluffy, separate. So it's going to be a lovely base for this pilaf. I end up liking to put all of it together, so mixing the rice and the lentils and the vegetables, but you could also layer it, and then people could kind of dip into it as a layered dish. So I'm going to put this in, and my lentils have been out. I also mentioned I have some hopefully somewhat thawed brown rice. So I just use a recycled jar for my storing of extra grains once they're cooked, and pop them in the freezer.
And that's something you can do with almost anything. Freezing is a really great way to just extend the life of something if you have too much of it, or you want to have it for later, but you're about it going bad. You can cook. You can put cooked grains. You can put cooked vegetables. You can put, your stock. You can almost anything, beans, proteins, all of that freezes really well. Freezing is just an excellent way to preserve things.
And I save all my old jars. So if I have a jar of nut butter or a jar of honey or a jar of whatever, I save them, run them through the dishwasher, or just wash them really well. And then I have that as a storage container, which would be a good way to get away from plastic. And you bought the jar, you might as well use it more than once, right? So here's
I
my
love reusing jars.
Great.
Wow, look at those beautiful colors.
Wow. Well, I think that's about ready. I can just toss it in, and last but not least, almost forgot my time. We're almost out of time too. I love the jokes about time, THYME, but I'm gonna just, contrary to what Jenny said, which I kind of forgot, I didn't put my time into the recipe when I was first sauteing things, but I'm just gonna add it on now.
And herbs there's a little more flexibility with herbs than with the spices. The ground spices, which are the seed part of the plant, it's harder to add those later and have them really get infused. Whereas herbs, which are the leaf part of the plant, they're they can kind of go at different points, because you can eat those herbs really just fresh and they still have wonderful flavor. So there's more sort of flexibility with the herbs than with the spices.
When do you know that your fresh herbs just aren't fresh anymore?
I would smell them and taste them. I mean, okay. And the thing is, if you have fresh herbs that are starting to dry, just let them dry, and then you can use them dry. I mean, I have a massive bunch of dill that I just pulled out of my pots a few weeks ago, and I'm just hanging it over here by my stove, and it's just going to dry, and then I'll take all the leaves off of that and put it in a jar. So it doesn't mean you can't use it anymore. You kind of have to turn it into a dried herb.
That makes sense. Thank you. Mm-hmm. This looks excellent.
Yes. So I've pulled my shepherd's pie out. It probably could stay in. I mean, it didn't get a real crusty on top, so I might stick it back in, but it's sort of up to you. As I said, with your shepherd's pie, everything is already cooked, so you don't have to worry about, the safety of it. And it's very hot all the way through. So it's just a matter of what kind of texture you're going for on the top.
Can you just broil it really quickly?
Yeah, you can. You can pop it in there and turn your broiler on, and it'll get a nice kind of brown crust. In fact, I probably my broiler convection is loud, so I'll probably do that once we say goodbye and just finish it off that way.
And if you don't use your broiler at home, use your time very sparingly, because it works very quickly.
Yes.
My son, who doesn't use broil very often, decided to use it and thought he had more time than he actually did.
Do that too, yeah.
So I have my green mash in the little green bowl here, just to demonstrate. You can see some of the skins and the little colors. I don't know if you can see super closely. Yeah. So some of the different colors, just real subtle, but the rutabaga, celeriac, and potatoes all went in there with butter, salt, and pepper. So just pretty simple and really chunky still. And I just used my hand masher, as it were, here. So awesome. Good old fashioned hand masher. And it just took a couple of mashes, and that was good. And I will check on my squash. Hopefully they are getting close to being done. And then I have a really colorful, beautiful feast, which is, mine is vegetarian, but it wouldn't have to be. You could absolutely include this all with chicken or turkey, fish, pork, beef, really, I mean, any meat.
And likewise, this shepherd's pie could easily be made without meat. So you could just use a lot of vegetables, which I often do, or you could throw something like tofu or tempeh in and have that or even beans, and have that take the place of the meat. So with all of the things that we are using, there's there's so much flexibility. It's again, just what you like and what you have and what you want.
Here's my little squash seeds. See how nicely they're browning and toasting. And I left some of the gook on there. You don't need to rinse it all off. It actually tastes even sweeter if you keep some of the squash flesh on it. Yep. So I'm going to pop it in for just maybe 2 more minutes to toast up the rest of those and let the other squash bits keep toasting.
Someone's telling me today that they put the squash seeds in when they are cooking their squash soup, and then they strain it out before they puree it. So the seeds add that flavor that way. So I thought that was interesting.
That's a good idea. Yeah,
Well,
options.
That's a creative approach. I like that.
Mhm.
If you grind up your seeds in a soup, does it change the flavor profile?
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would also just, the thing about squash seeds and other seeds, that's like an outer shell. And so if I was going to grind them up, I might crack them open and take the inside part out and grind that up, because I don't know how well the shell part would grind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
But they're
to know.
tasty as a snack, or I'm planning to garnish the pilaf with the seeds.
Very nice. Yeah, I think about pumpkin seeds, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
Same
you
concept.
don't think twice about, popping those in the oven.
Right, yeah. Those are the same, they're the squash family. So
Yeah, same concept.
And you paid for it. You might as well use all of it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
yes.
Well, this looks amazing. We've got some new things to try during this fall season. These are definitely comfy foods. But I would encourage you during this season, cook with an attitude of gratitude. That's another thing that I love about this show that we do, is that there is a reverence for the food and how it came to be and how it went from the farm or your garden to your plate, and recognizing not just the different steps that you go through, but the indigenous individuals who really passed some of this along and helped us to better understand how to use food as medicine. That's been the goal all year long. Using food as medicine. That'll probably be next year's line. Using food as medicine, right? Because it really is. Food is either, I oftentimes tell my son, he's 26 years old. He has a palate for all the things he probably should not eat, especially because he doesn't have a spleen, or a gallbladder. But but I tell him all the time, food is either going to help you to feel better or it's going to make you feel worse. And so what you put in your body, I'm not saying we have to be perfect in everything that we eat, but we should be knowledgeable and mindful so that we can make informed decisions about what we put in our bodies. And there's so much more to learn about food than what we've been dished.
Yeah.
Upon.
Yeah.
And so this is the creativity that we've included in all of our shows. And by the way, if you're watching this and you're interested in watching other episodes, other sessions that we've had, you can visit us on our YouTube channel, and I'll put the address, the link to our YouTube channel in the chat so that you can visit us there and watch many of these other episodes that we've made reference to, the soup and stock and all of these other different things that we've talked about.
My mash is delicious.
Yay.
Yeah, it's delicious.
And once again, I'm nowhere near there, so I can help you to try it out and make sure that it gets eaten up.
Well, come home soon.
I know. This is wonderful. You guys, you want to show the last of your presentation and then we'll wrap up.
Are there more slides? I don't remember.
There are, as a matter of fact. So let me.
We had just the ending of the stock.
Yes.
So I think I talked through that, but this slide just kind of describes putting everything in a pot with water, bringing it to a boil, and then letting it really just kind of stay at a low boil or a high simmer for quite a while. And it'll get pretty aromatic, especially if you have herbs and, garlic skins and that kind of thing. So you can let it go as long as you want, but keep in mind that it's going to get more and more and more concentrated and cooked down. So you don't want to walk away for too long without checking it, because I have had it actually cook away and completely dry up. So do that, and then pick all the meat off the bones, of course, because that's good stuff. You can also make vegetable stock. I chose to do this because a lot of people will be having turkey or other meat for their big meal. And so it's a really great way to use, especially turkey bones, because there's so much. And my mom always makes turkey soup after Thanksgiving. So that's like a really wonderful extra treat. And but you don't have to make chicken or turkey soup. You can just make the stock and then turn it into whatever kind of soup you want. But you can certainly do this without meat and just make vegetable stock too.
And a tip on freezing it, make sure if you put it in a jar, leave some headspace, like about your thumb, sort of an inch at least between the top of the liquid and the jar lid, because if you fill it all the way full, it will expand when it freezes, and then you will break your jar and have a mess, and you won't be able to use what you have frozen. So take it from my experience.
Very important to do that.
Yeah. Space. And if you're worried about, am I leaving enough space? Leave more than you think. So yeah, about at least an inch.
Ray, thank you for adding that, because that's really important. I think that I really love the idea about putting them in the ice cube trays too. And then you can portion it as you need to for however long it lasts you. So that's another good idea. That's something that I'll be doing.
And that's a really great thing. You can pull up one out like into the mash made or the pilaf that Kate just made. You can just throw a block or two in as it's cooking, and it just infuses some of that and some nutrition right in.
Yep. Well, I know that we made mention, just very quickly, we like to review these slides just before we end, just so that people understand the value and the importance of our macronutrients. Yeah. So who wants to take this over?
I will. I love fats.
Yeah.
So fats we saw tonight in the meat that Jenny used, in the butter that I used in the mash, the seeds that we're using in my squash seeds that are on my food view a little bit. I put them on top of the pilaf at this point and put my squash back in the oven, but they're there.
Olive oil that I use to saute and also to make the sauce.
Exactly, the olive oil as a version of olives in that picture. And this communicates satiety, satisfaction, goodness in our body, in our palate, and also is critical for nerve and brain health, for fat soluble vitamin absorption, and for communicating flavor throughout the dish, like spreading it, as fats are typically that sort of, that conductor.
I love fat too.
Yeah.
We all should remember
good fats.
That good, and when we say good, we mean fats that come from nature, fats that are naturally occurring in food are incredibly important, nourishing, sustaining for us. And so it's really important for us to include them and to enjoy them and to know which ones we're talking about.
And some of those healthy fats are even in proteins.
That's right. They overlap.
Absolutely. I was teaching this class today and we had this beautiful meal, and it was a chili with beans, and then pretty much everything else on the plate was vegetables and grains. And somebody said, well, aside from the beans, where's the protein in this meal? And I said, everywhere. It's all over your plate, because we have, again, this idea, and I think we have been given this message, right? That protein is in one thing over here, and that's where you get your protein. And then your grains are over here and your vegetables are over here, and they're not related to each other at all. And in fact, you can see there's vegetables in that protein picture. There's nuts and seeds, there's legumes, there's animal proteins also, there's dairy. So it isn't an either or, it's kind of more of a both and. And I think it's really helpful to know that, because it means that we should focus less on where we're getting a particular nutrient or a particular vitamin, and focus more on a diversity of good whole foods. And then we can be pretty sure that we're getting all of it.
And vegetables have protein too.
And then carbohydrates, just, you know, the starchy, the sugar, but also the fiber. Very important ingredient. Also not just from pasta or bread, but as you can see, lots of fruits and vegetables are also full of carbohydrates, grains, legumes. So again, back to that idea that whole foods, a variety, a diversity of whole foods is going to pretty much have you covered. That's right.
And colors.
Keep colors.
Yeah. Gotta have the colors. So you had mentioned about the whole grains. Perfect timing.
Yep. So they have 3 parts when they are intact, and those are where the real nutrient money is: the bran and the germ, the brown parts in that picture. And then the middle layer, which is called the endosperm, is the starchy part, which quickly turns to sugar when it's refined, meaning the bran and the germ are taken away in processing. And so keeping your grains intact, like the wild rice that I cooked, the brown rice, millet, quinoa, amaranth, teff, oats, buckwheat. Those are all examples of whole grains, and our bodies have the digestive material, like machinery and the different enzymes and things that they need to break these down. And so our teeth, our enzymes, the digestive system is really well equipped to break down these whole intact grains cooked. And we don't need to have them refined for any reason other than it's been done for taste reasons, for a bit of shelf stability in the form of bread, but it really doesn't do us a service from a nutrition standpoint to have refined grains in our diet. They're much more inflammatory and quickly become sugar.
And we can grow whole grains at home, correct? To some degree?
Grains are hard.
Okay.
Grains are a little harder to grow, but there are many, many whole grains available even in your regular grocery store. You should
all over.
So if you know what you're looking for, you can source it locally still.
That's right. Oh yeah. And I worry a bit less about these being 100% local, but there are local grain growers in Minnesota, and wild rice is technically a grass, but it kind of acts like a grain.
Yes.
And it is a absolutely indigenous regional food to our specific region, harvested by Native American people for centuries.
And delicious.
And
absolutely delicious.
It's very delicious. Yes, and full of protein too.
When I go to the Minnesota State Fair, I never miss a year of getting the wild rice burger. Shameless plug. Okay, next slide. Because I really do like this slide here, because I like the way that the Canadians have done their food plate. So let's just explain that.
Yeah, I mean, what's so nice about this, number one, is that it's a picture. It's not just words or colors, which can only help inform you so much. And this is really easy to see. And the other thing that we really like about it, obviously the vegetables and fruits are just beautiful and colorful and take up half the plate. They're not in different sections, but even where there is kind of a protein section, it just says eat protein foods. And then it has a whole bunch of different kinds of protein foods in that section. So it's very clear. It isn't just one kind, it's any or a combination of all of those that will give you be the protein foods part of your plate. And then the same thing with whole grain foods. You can see there is some bread, there is some pasta, but just a huge variety of different kinds of intact whole grains. And so it's just a really easy way to sort of understand the proportions and the variety that makes sense.
Love it.
And water.
And
Water.
water.
Is-
Water. Love water.
That's what nature gives us to drink.
Oops, I went too fast.
That's okay. We talked about mindful eating as we were discussing the digestive action that starts when we smell and see, and we're present with our cooking, with the people that we're with. And food is complicated. So take yourself off the hook. Try not to practice judgment when it comes to food. But awareness, observing, savoring, and being in the moment will really help make you more present, more able to enjoy what you're eating, and hopefully the people you're eating with.
Awesome. Well, I just want to make sure that I once again remind people that you can view this session on demand in about 24 hours, but our previous sessions are also available. You see the link right there. It's our bit.ly SickleCellMN-YouTube, and you can get to our other episodes as well. Please visit our website, just poke around, learn more about sickle cell disease, as well as the work that we do in the community around community wellness. Of course, I mean, this is the last one of the year, so I'm feeling a little sentimental right now. But this, we have just had the best time this year with some amazing, amazing, amazing instructors. Dr. Kate Shafto and Jenny Broccoli Breen. They have brought their skills, their expertise, their love of cooking, and their attitude of gratitude with them. Every single month, we've been able to be creative together. And I just want to say, as a representation of Sickle Cell Foundation of Minnesota, thank you so much for entering into this partnership that we didn't know where it was going to go, but we were like, no, but we're going to do this.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that we did. And I think that doing it virtually was a beautiful alternative to being in person. And it lives in perpetuity. So it's now accessible by anyone and everyone at any given time. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you,
Ray, for having the vision for doing this.
Absolutely.
You are a phenomenal host,
Yeah.
Facilitator. So I really, I really enjoyed working with you, and it's just so great. And I hope folks who have been participating enjoy it and spread the word, because this is a really incredible resource.
Absolutely. And stay tuned. Well, the year 2023, we've got some surprises in store for you. We'll make announcements. If you've attended any of our sessions, our cooking sessions in the past, you'll get an email with updates about what we're doing in 2023. And we look forward to having you join us once again. So thank you for sharing this time with us. Thank you for coming into the kitchen with us, and we'll see you next time. Continue to eat well, be well, stay healthy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.